Leafs versus Senators, Tavares versus Revenue Canada, trade speculation versus trade reality. All of that more coming up on today's edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leaf-centered podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano, and my co-host, Dave Morassutti. What's going on, pal? How you feeling on a Friday?
Feeling pretty good, Leafs back
Ready?
in action.
Ready for the big weekend? What do you got planned for the Super Bowl?
I'm working.
That's the problem about sports media is a lot of people expect for you to be doing something cool. It's like, oh, what do you got going on? You go to a big party, but sometimes it's like, no, I got to work. Unfortunately, it's like Leaf games. People always ask me, oh, you want to go to the bar, want to go watch a Leaf game? I'm like, watching the games is kind of work for me. Not as much, I suppose. Like last year when I was on Leafs lunch, I was more like I was at the games. I was actually down there and covering them on a daily basis. So I guess I was definitely unable to attend bars and friends and whatnot. This year it's a little bit more liberal, but yeah, sometimes when you work in the sports industry, these fun sporting events are just that. It's work sometimes. So I feel for you, buddy. I luckily do not have to work on Sunday. But I'll be watching it, having some people over for the Super Bowl. We're going to have a little potluck. I'm making ribs. I think we're ordering in some pizza, some wings. Someone's bringing a buffalo chicken dip. I'm excited. Very excited about it.
A buffalo chicken dip.
You've never had a buffalo chicken dip?
Never had a buffalo chicken dip.
Dave, before you die, you need to have buffalo chicken dip. I mean, are you a fan of buffalo wings?
Yes, I am.
Dog, it's a buffalo wing, but it's in dip form. It's tremendous. It's possibly the best dip on the market. I mean, when you talk about dips, like dip game is strong, right? Like you've got salsas, you've got quesos, you've got spinach dip, dude. Taco dip. Have you ever had taco dip? Please tell
I've
me
had
that
taco dip.
Okay, so it's kind of similar-ish, but it's made out of chicken. There's like some chicken stuff in there, and basically just it's hot sauce and cheese and blue cheese, and it's really good. I don't know exactly how it's made, but it just kind of tastes like a chicken wing on some tostito. It's pretty fantastic. I'd highly recommend it. Highly recommend. Possibly you could have some while you're watching the game tomorrow night between the Maple Leafs and the Ottawa Senators, because before the big game on Sunday, you got a big game, a big battle of Ontario between the Leafs and the Sens. We'll get to that in just a moment, kind of tee up and break that game down for y'all. But what happened on Thursday, Dave, was this caught me off guard. And I kind of don't. I'm ashamed that we didn't talk about this at all on yesterday's podcast, but the Leafs held their annual outdoor practice at Nathan Phillips Square on Thursday, and it completely blindsided me. I totally forgot that it was happening, but it's that annual practice that they hold. It looked like a lot of fun. I saw some pictures, saw some write-ups, saw people tweeting about it. Looked like it was a nice time. The team took the TTC from Scotiabank down to Nathan Phillips. Apparently, William Nylander was the ringleader. Yes, he knows exactly what he's doing on the TTC. He is the face of the TTC right now, obviously in the city of Toronto. It looked like a good time.
Yeah, I think they had the dogs out. Nothing. Dogs make everything better. So there's that. And yeah, I totally caught off guard too, because I think I saw like a post saying taking things outdoors tomorrow, and I'm like, there's an outdoor. A friend of mine was like, "You gonna go watch the outdoor practice?" And I'm like, I had no idea that it was even happening.
Dude, I probably would have went down if I didn't work the morning show. But I had when you wake up at 5 a.m. after going to bed at 1 a.m. you need to take a nap after that show. So I unfortunately kind of took a little nap during the time where I could have went down there, but it looked like a lot of fun. And actually, I thought it was pretty cool. Apparently, the PWHL Toronto team was out there and they had a little skills competition before the Leafs came out to practice. So, got to see, I'm sure Sarah Nurse was down there, Renata Fast, Natalie Spooner, who actually is leading the league in goals in the early PWHL inaugural season, which is pretty sweet. Right here in Toronto, you got Nat Spooner leading the way in the PWHL. You got Austin Matthews leading the way in the NHL. Just a bunch of goal scorers here in the city of Toronto. You know what I thought about though? And it again completely caught me off guard, completely slipped my mind yesterday when we were having that conversation about whether or not, if the Leafs didn't turn things around in that second period, went as badly as the first, and the third period also went as badly, and it just turned out to be a gong show of a game. And we had discussed, like what if, could Sheldon Keefe's job have been in jeopardy if that game continued to snowball much like it did in the first 20 minutes? And could you imagine if they actually did like fire Keefe last night or fire Keefe Thursday morning and then had to hold this outdoor practice? Like, I don't even know what the hell they would have. They probably just wouldn't have fired Keefe, I suppose. That probably wouldn't even be in the cards just based on what was on the table Thursday. And that would have just been a complete gong show if Keefe got fired either the night before or the morning of that skate. So, again, slipping my mind, probably regardless of how terrible that game would have been against Dallas. Luckily, it didn't, so it didn't matter. But he probably would not have lost his job last night anyway.
Yeah, I don't think they would have done it at that point. Yeah, they probably, if they were going to do it, they'd probably wait until the weekend. Just saying, especially if they're on the road. Although they would be in Ottawa, so most of the Toronto media would be in Ottawa anyway. So no real way to. I always say if you're gonna make a head coaching change, better to do it on the road, less noise at that point. They've done it before. They did it all the way when they were in Arizona last time.
That's true. That is very, very true. At least I'd hope that the Leafs have the courtesy to at least get the guy his own cab or his own Uber or his own plane ride home. Unlike another head coach we know who got left behind in the back.
Still looking for a job.
He is still looking for a job, which is kind of interesting. He's had a lot of success. We're talking about Gerard Gallant, obviously, when he got let go by the Florida Panthers a few years back, and the infamous picture of him waiting for his own cab after being left behind when they fired him after a loss a few years back. So there was another story that kind of started circulating yesterday on Wednesday that we were going to get to, but we kind of ran out of time. It was this John Tavares versus Revenue Canada story. And look, I'm not an accountant. When it comes to taxes, I am very ignorant to how the whole system works. Luckily, one of us is a smart mind, and that would be you. Explain to the listeners, the viewers, what the heck is going on with John Tavares and this whole tax situation.
Yeah, so essentially Tavares's legal team applied for a appeal with the CRA because the CRA claims that Tavares owes more taxes than he believed he should have paid back in 2018 when he made $15.3 million in a signing bonus. And the CRA claims that he should be paying $8 million. Now, it's not all $8 million, also includes the interest on the taxes that he hasn't paid off of that. So I think it was like 1.2 million in just interest alone, which is quite a bit of money. So it was 6.8 in taxes plus $1.2 million in interest owing. They also said that Tavares' income in 2018 was $17.8 million higher than what was reported because Tavares was reporting his salary, not his signing bonus, because his signing bonus is taxed it's supposed to be taxed differently. There's a different tax bracket. This is why players and agents are now going towards getting their money in signing bonuses, because that's only taxed at 15%.
Because I believe it's if I'm not Why? Why is it only taxed at 15%? I don't want to say something wrong.
So they call it an inducement, which is pretty much saying it's an incentive for athletes, so, singers, songwriters, artists to come and be in play in Canada. That's the incentive for them to do it. If you get paid in a signing bonus and a one-time thing, we only will tax the 15% off of that rather than taking a higher tax on a salary earned.
So this would also work if, like, I don't know, let's just say Justin Bieber was paid $1 million to come and do one concert, one-time deal at like the Rogers Center, instead of taxing him at the 40%, 38%, whatever the tax rate typically would be, it would only be at 15% because it's a one-time deal, and that's how I guess the things work and operate with the CRA.
Yeah, exactly. And so that's the issue right now, is that all these Leafs players, Tavares, Marner, Matthews.
So then what's the problem? Like, how come the CRA all of a sudden is like, actually, no, you owe us that money? Like, obviously, if this is like a tax break, it's essentially a tax break for athletes and
So it's different if you're a US based athlete, right? They're claiming he was a Canadian resident, and Tavares' argument is that the bonus was paid into a New York-based account in July of 2018, and he had only spent 45 days in Canada from September to December. Remember, that's the tax year that he is claiming this under in 2018. He wasn't playing for the Leafs all of 2018.
September or maybe August, he got a place or whatever until the end of the year.
Yeah, and so his agent or his accountant, I guess, the person that's representing him, was saying, like, part of his consideration to come and play in Canada and play with the Leafs was the signing bonus. It was a huge consideration of this, not the salary, not the wages, but that actual signing bonus was a big consideration for him to come up into Canada, right? To come and play for the Leafs. It's an argument they're going to put towards whether that's true or not.
I'm sure it was, but it's more so, I guess, like the signing bonus, because it was all offered up front, right? Like, it was very front-loaded signing bonus. If I recall, he earned like 30-something million in like that calendar year from like July 1 to July 1, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. Between what he made with the Leafs and because of the two signing bonuses, right?
Yeah.
And so, essentially they're trying to tell the CRA, you can tax us on the 15%, where we're not paying the full. I think it was like 38% plus interest. Which
that's, I mean, like eight. Well, just to pony up $8 million, like, that's. I know he's an athlete, and like he might have that in his bank account, like, possibly, but like, that's still tough, man. Like, that's a lot of money, dude. $8 million bucks just to have to write a check to the Canadian government. That'd be a tough pill to swallow. I probably would also do what Tavares is doing and dispute it. We'll see where it ends up going. It's weird though, because this happened back in 2018. It took 6 years for like the CRA to notice. Like, did they audit him? That's where I'm confused. Why it took so long for this to come to light.
Yeah, that's the part I'm confused. Like, how all of a sudden now we're just seeing this appeal happening now. But if you've ever dealt with the CRA, I've dealt with the CRA countless times. Nothing gets done quickly. I'm still waiting for something from the CRA from like a month ago that I had a conversation with someone. Like, it does not happen quickly.
All government agencies, realistically, not just Revenue Canada.
Exactly. So, there's, and this is something that, if an athlete sees this, already know that some athletes have their own views of playing in Canada.
See,
the thing is, I understand that.
Put a pin on this, because we got to take a break. Because so this was like a secondary conversation. There was a piece that was in the National Post that kind of talked about if there could be implications going forward with athletes maybe not wanting to come to Canada. I don't know if I'm buying it. So why don't we take take a quick break. We'll come back. We can get into that. You can tell your side. I'll tell my side.
Yep.
And we'll kind of get down to the bottom of that. Also, we got a couple of things we got to touch on. The TSN and Daily FaceOff. We're a month until the NHL trade deadline. So the trade bait boards have been updated. We'll kind of go through them and talk about a few of the players that the Leafs should be targeting. And one Maple Leaf showed up on the TSN trade bait board. We'll tell you who that is also. And Leafs Sens Battle of Ontario reignites tomorrow. So we'll tee that game up in a little bit as well. I'm Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Today's episode is brought to you by eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is what also keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors says everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance, from superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because of eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need, the price you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay Guaranteed Fit only available to U.S. customers. Welcome back to the Locked On Leafs podcast. It's Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassutti. We're a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast. We got new episodes coming out each and every weekday, Monday through Friday, wherever you get your podcast at. And also, you can watch the video form on YouTube as well. So we're kind of digging into this John Tavares story that kind of went viral. There was a piece written in the National Post also about how this could have further implications when it comes to not just the Maple Leafs, but all Canadian sports teams when it comes to trying to lure free agents and lure players to their teams. Dave, why do you think this could have further implications going forward?
Well, here's my thing. We already know that there's players who have a thought about playing in Canada, whether it's, moving their families, uprooting their families to come to Canada, somewhere that they don't really know a lot about. Some of the guys don't like the weather. That's I think that's a viewpoint. There's a lot of cities in the U.S. that have similar weather to Canada. But
Did you see what happened in Kansas City a couple of weeks ago? Hey, no thanks.
Nope.
Haven't had that weather in Toronto, just saying. Or the weather in Buffalo the next week. Haven't had that weather here either.
No. So definitely not happening. But the other thing that gets brought up is taxes. And when there's ever free agents coming out looking to sign, some people say, "Oh, maybe a team can get him for a half decent deal." Yeah. And then we always hear that when a player signs, let's say Toronto, there's I always hear from my friends of mine saying the Toronto tax.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just you're playing for the Leafs, you're gonna.
Well, that's what that is. The Toronto tax isn't literally a tax. It's, you got to put up with the market, and it's more expensive to live here, so it might cost you a little bit more to get it. I get all that. And then you think about some of these tax-free states like Florida, Dallas, Vegas and Nevada, those places, Nashville. There's a bunch of spots around the U.S. that are, tax-free when it comes to, they don't have to pay any state income tax. But my question, though, and this is where I kind of want to dig into that article a little bit, is how is that any different than the way it's been? This isn't a new rule. This is just maybe a misunderstanding that Tavares and the CRA is involved in, but this has always been the way. This has always been the case. I don't think this is necessarily something new that's going to pop up and that's going to all of a sudden see the CRA go and get a bunch of back pay in unpaid taxes from all these players and expect going forward that they're going to start taxing these guys out the ass. To me, this is just kind of a one-off and maybe just a mistake or a misinterpretation of things. I don't see this being an issue going forward.
That's the one thing I didn't agree with the article. The article kind of insinuated that it would change Tavares' opinion on staying in Canada. on his.
He's a Canadian citizen. He's born here. His family's here. It's not like he's from Russia or from America. Like if this was Austin Matthews, maybe. Okay, sure, perhaps that could be the case, but it's not. It's John Tavares. It's PJ boy who wanted to come home. Why would he care that he doesn't want to be in Canada? What do you mean? He's a Canadian citizen. He grew up here. His family's here. His friends are here. It's idiotic.
Also, his accountant, I think, is with KPMG, one of the top accounting firms in the country. One of them where I literally would see the building every time I was downtown. I think they could find ways to make sure he doesn't get dinged too much on his taxes. Also, if you're making a lot of money and if you're smart with your money, you can invest your money and make decent money. And also, he gets paid in US dollars, not in Canadian dollars.
That rarely gets brought up when people People talk about the tax-free state. I mean, when you look at the difference in the dollar right now, like people in Canada get paid, players in Canada automatically get an extra 25-30% raise just when they convert their money. Like right now, I'm pretty sure it's like $1.30 or maybe even $1.35. I think it's 35 cents on the dollar. It's the 35% extra by playing in Canada. I get it. It evens out a little bit because the cost of living is a lot higher here, but that rarely gets brought up when people talk about salaries and values and no tax states versus tax states. It's like living in a Canadian city, you also do get a little bit more money just based on conversion.
You do, but the tax situation still kind of impacts what you're able to take home from your actual salary. I do 100%. Admit that, but there is a little bit of a give and take there in terms of what you bring back. Like you look at Ryan O'Reilly and Luke Shen both signed in Nashville. You don't think that a little part of that played into, we won't get dinged too much on taxes on our salary here. And no, Nashville's not a terrible team, but it's also not a team I expected those guys to go to as well.
Yeah, perhaps. And speaking of those guys, there were a couple of names I saw on the trade bait boards that Nashville has that potentially could be of interest to the Toronto Maple Leafs. So let's shift focus into the trade bait boards that kind of are coming out. We're a month away from the NHL trade deadline, which is March 8th. So excited about that, obviously. And we thought, hey, it's Friday. Let's come up with a little Friday 5-pack of 5 players that we found on these trade bait boards, whether it was on TSNs or Daily FaceOffs. Both updated theirs today with a month out that we would be interested in. And I gotta tell you, there was one out in Nashville that I actually did have a little bit of interest in, and it was a defenseman by the name of Alexander Carrier. Dave, and it's not a name that's being brought up a lot, and he's kind of an underrated player, but he's a right shot defenseman who I think possibly could be someone that the Maple Leafs could be interested in. He's a UFA. He's only making $2.5 million this year. I don't think he'd be overly expensive to get. Just be a solid depth player, right? He's a kind of a two-way-ish defenseman. I think he would be an interesting get. So he was kind of an honorable mention for me. But let's get into our top 5, I suppose. Why don't you start? Give me your 5 guys that you have identified, and then I'll comment and give you mine.
Yeah. So I mean, if I'm looking at just the trade bait boards, Chris Tanev, Noah Hannafin are like the top 2 defensive guys that I'd be looking at.
Tanev was number 1 on TSNs. Hannafin was number 1 on Daily FaceOff. So
yeah. Actually, and it's funny, Hannafin's 6 on TSN, which I found to be quite a little lower than I expected, let's just say.
Yeah, they're both going, ultimately, I think.
They're both going. I do believe so. I thought, I keep hearing Scott Laughton's name being thrown around there. There's reports saying that the Leafs had looked into a deal for Scott Laughton, and it just came a little expensive. He's making $3 million for the next 2 years. So I'm wondering if a little salary matching would have to work out there to make the trade work. But as a third line center, I think he would be, an interesting target there. And
what
then
would that entail? Salary matching. What would that have to?
Well, I don't know, because I don't know if Philly can actually retain salary. So would they be taking a contract off the books?
Is that they can't retain? Well, I guess I think they have Kevin Hayes is one that they are retaining.
They're already retaining Provorov, I think, as well.
I don't know if they retained on Provorov. I'm pretty sure that was like a three-way deal, and LA took a chunk of Provorov. I'm looking at it right now. Yeah, only Kevin Hayes is retained. So they actually do have two retention spots left, because I did see something earlier today also. It was a Philly reporter. Rasmus Ristolainen, apparently the Leafs may have engaged in conversation with. This is, again, just a reporter out in Philly that I saw on Twitter. I don't know how legitimate it is. But apparently they might be willing to eat salary to bring it down to about $3.5 million AAV if teams were interested in getting Ristolainen. Again, he didn't show up on my list here because he wasn't on any of the trade bait boards, but that just means that they are willing to retain salary to get deals done. So, possibly they could also be willing to do so on Scott Laughton, who's got a couple of years left on that deal.
Yes, he does. And, Andrew Peeke was someone that we had brought up before the season. If, Columbus is looking to shed players, he might be worth just even as a cheap depth addition at this point in time. And then
I think he's been like healthied a lot.
Like I don't even think he would cost that much, because like they're not even playing their top defense prospect in David Jiricek. He was thrown down into the AHL. They're not trading him, but they're just throwing him in the AHL, and that situation kind of didn't really go over so well with Jiricek there. What
about Boquist? Another guy in Columbus, young player, 23 years old. He's more of an offensive defenseman, but
yeah.
I mean, look, John Klingberg was supposed to fill a role of an offensive defenseman to try and help get a little bit of production from the back end. Maybe they take a flyer on a Boquist. Would you be interested in that if he's available? Which it sounds as though he is. Him and Peeke kind of both have been guys who've been getting the short end of the stick over there.
Yeah, I think like new situations might work for them. They're both players, I think, that have a lot of potential still. So those were kind of like the five. Like Boquist, I had kind of him and Peeke kind of merged together there.
Yeah.
But like a Pavel Buchnevich was one I had thought about. Give a little bit of that two-sided game that they really could use come playoff time. I just wonder if that's going to be too expensive. Probably would be.
Yeah.
And not really fill the need that they have right now.
The only way I see them moving on a Buchnevich is if they also like pretty much swapped him out for like Bertuzzi, essentially, would be kind of the way I see it happen. Or maybe Max Domi, I guess, could be another guy who they swap out for him. I don't know if they're in the business of making a deal like that, because they'd also have to pay on top of that to get him. But he's a good player. I mean, a couple of years ago, I kind of identified him when he was still in New York as someone that the Leafs should target, and they didn't get him. St. Louis did, and they've got themselves a good player. But he's now on the board and probably available. We'll see if Toronto pulls a trigger there. But I think he's making 5.8, I believe. And
yeah, it's a hefty ticket for.
Yeah, one more year left on that, or is it UFA?
Yeah, one more year.
Yeah, so less likely that St. Louis would be willing to retain on that as well. So we'll see what ends up happening there. So once again, go through your five guys.
So I had, let's go up to the top. So Tanev, Hanifin, Scott Laughton, Peeke, Boquist. Let's do Peeke and Boquist. I think Buchnevich is too much for that.
All right. My top five guys, or just five guys. I didn't really like power rank them here, but a couple overlaps. I had Chris Tanev, obviously. He's the apple of the eye of a lot of Leaf fans, right shot, rugged defenseman, kind of fills holes that they need. Is he the be all end all? I do see some pushback coming in from some members of Leafs Nation who, say, oh, he's 34 years old. There's no way you're giving up a first round pick for him. He's not going to move the needle. Look, I kind of agree with that sentiment. I don't think he's going to necessarily move the needle where Tanev as a lone addition brings them from non-contender to cup contender, but I think he would still be a really good add and a good piece and give you that snarl that you're looking for, a great penalty killer, and he's got a lot of experience as well. Noah Hanifin is also on my list, obviously, so if you could pair both those guys, you bring in a Tanev and a Hanifin. I don't know if it's possible, but if you could, now you're talking. That does transform the blue line by bringing in two top 4 defensemen,
Yeah.
that'd be big, obviously, moving forward. So both those guys are kind of overlap. And I also had Scott Lawton as a name of interest that I also had on my list here. Here's another one for you. Adam Henrique from the Anaheim Ducks, and he's a pending UFA. And look, I think Adam Henrique, or I look at the Maple Leafs, and I think they needed to get a third line center as well. We had talked about how in 32 Thoughts, there was a sentiment that apparently the Leafs might be looking for another center. And I think Adam Henrique kind of checks the boxes of what they'd be looking for, right? He'd be a perfect third line center, someone who's responsible defensively, who can win faceoffs, who can kill penalties, and who can really fill that void of a traditional third line center. So he is somebody who's a pending UFA that, again, Anaheim, they're not competing. They probably would be willing to retain some salary, maybe get a double retention with another team in there. I don't think he'd be super expensive to go out and get. But I think that would definitely be a big time grab for the Maple Leafs to just give them some depth in their bottom 6. Another guy on Anaheim, and maybe you can do a 2-for-1 kind of deal, and it'd be Ilya Lyubushkin. Bring the Boosh back to Toronto. I mean, he actually worked out pretty well alongside Morgan Riley. And I wonder, like, if you bring back Lyubushkin, would you put him back up there with Riley? And, does that move and slot Brody into more of an appropriate role at this point in his career? He seems to be swimming a little bit, getting those top pair minutes. Perhaps you slot him into the second, maybe third pair if you like what Benoit and McCabe are doing. And you give Lyubushkin that opportunity with Riley. We saw that successful a couple of playoffs ago. That would be an interesting addition as well that I'd be keeping an eye on.
It would be. I did hear his name. The only thing I don't know is if that could be like the 2-for-1 sort of deal you could try to make where you get both Lyubushkin and Henrique. Salary would be the big hurdle in obviously the Henrique case because he's making over 5, but we've seen teams do the double retention. I think there's more teams that are going to be willing to do the double retention and in that case. So yeah, I wouldn't hate Lyubushkin come back. I think he plays a style that the team doesn't really have right now.
Yeah, and look, like the Leafs have cap space, right? Like they do have some space right now with with Klingberg on IR or LTIR, obviously Murray, Jake Mutt. Like they've got some space where they'll be able to make some trades. They can add some players into it. Like I'm not 100% sold that if they were able to add 2 defensemen, if one goes out, one being maybe even a Timothy Liljegren, to add, give you some more space to work with when it comes to
even Connor Timmins.
Connor Timmins, yeah, it's another 1.1 million that's on the cap that they could, get some space for. So it's very possible that this team could make some moves. The cap isn't as constricting as it's been in, previous years. There's a little bit to work with there. And again, the double retention, it seems like teams are willing to do that nowadays. So perhaps that could be a way to try and make a couple of moves if you are the Toronto Maple Leafs. Really quickly, a couple other honorable mentions that I just want to throw out there that I thought would be interesting names. Frank Vetrano, also out in Anaheim. He's having a great season, 22 goals. He's someone who plays, a pretty solid style game, two-way kind of game. I think he would be someone who you put into the bottom 6 who could certainly add some offense and finally get some secondary scoring. So Frank Vetrano was one guy. Warren Fogle, interestingly enough, was a name that popped up on the trade bait board. Well, I think could be a terrific 3rd or 4th line winger for the Maple Leafs if Warren Fogle is available for a cheap price. And Nick Dowd was a very interesting name as well out in Washington. I like what Nick Dowd does, man. He's a really good two-way, more of a defensive center, I guess you could say. Solid, can kill some penalties. He's not afraid to hit. I think he's top 5 in hits, if I'm not mistaken. So a very physical player as well. Could be a 4th liner for you. So Nick Dowd was another name that was an honorable mention in the list that I was looking at. Was there anyone else who kind of piqued your interest that we didn't talk about that you want to give 30 seconds of love to?
Well, somebody brought Matt Dumba. I just think he's the
Pass.
shell of his former self.
Yeah,
I don't think he's that guy that gives Leafs what they want. They need. Somebody brought up Morgan Frost. If you want to go out and get a young player and try to see if you can get something for a player that's in a
Toronto boy.
Yeah, and also not doing well with Tortorella. He's kind of in the doghouse there. Morgan Frost wouldn't be a bad idea to see if you can do a buy low and see if you can get a reclamation project there a little bit.
Yeah, I don't hate that one. That's another possibility, obviously, as well. So, we'll keep having these conversations between now and the NHL trade deadline. We're a month out, plenty more discussions to be had. So make sure that you are subscribed to Locked On Leafs podcast so you can stay tuned to what we got to talk about. Let's take a quick break. Let's come back and quickly preview tomorrow night's game. Leafs and Senators, the Battle of Ontario reignites out in the nation's capital. We'll get to that in just a moment. I'm Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. You're listening to the Locked On Leafs podcast, part of Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
We're driven by the search for better. When it comes to hiring, the best way to search for a candidate isn't to search at all. Don't search, match with Indeed. If you need to hire, you need Indeed. It is your matching and hiring platform with over 350 million global monthly visitors, according to Indeed data, and a matching engine that helps you find quality candidates fast. Ditch the busy work. Use Indeed for scheduling, screening, and messaging so you can connect with candidates faster. And Indeed doesn't just help you hire faster. 93% of employers agree Indeed delivers the highest quality matches compared to other job sites, according to a recent Indeed survey. Leveraging over 140 million qualification preferences every day, Indeed's matching engine is constantly learning from your preferences, so the more you use Indeed, the better it gets. Join more than 3.5 businesses worldwide that use Indeed to hire great talent fast. And listen to the show, we'll get a $75 sponsored job credit to get your jobs more visibility at Indeed.com/lockedon. Just go to Indeed.com/lockedon right now and support our show by saying you heard about Indeed on this podcast. Indeed.com/lockedon. Terms and conditions apply. You need to hire? You need Indeed.
Today's show is also brought to you by Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on that 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at Robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And now for some legal info. Claim as of Q1 2024, validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of purchase, and first 3% match must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC is a registered broker-dealer. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. It's Mike DiStefano and Dave Morassutti. We got the Battle of Ontario going down tomorrow night up in the nation's capital. The Ottawa Senators lead the season series 2-1. So Toronto looking to even up the series. The one loss, however, did come in Ottawa. So the away teams so far have been victorious in all 3 of those meetings. So Toronto hoping to keep that trend going. But it's going to be Ottawa's first game back since the pre-All-Star game. Like they had their bye week after the All-Star game, so they haven't played yet since January 31st. But prior to that, they had won 4 of the last 6 games. So it's going to be important for Toronto to, I think, take advantage of an Ottawa team that could be a little rusty to start the game.
Yeah, and they're dealing with some injuries too. Like Jake Sanderson is not supposed to be playing this weekend. He's been out since I think the 31st. Actually, the last game they played before the All-Star break. He's been out with a lower body injury, so he's out. Anton Forsberg questionable. Yeah. Oh no, he's already been ruled out.
Oh, he's ruled out already.
Yeah, Jack Martin already said he's not going to play. And so he's been out. They obviously just got Shane Pinto back, so like they've played a little better since Pinto's come back, but they've also had some very ugly games, mainly because the goaltending is still not there, right? Korpisalo, he's still struggling. Anton Forsberg has been practicing, but he just got back to practicing, so I don't know if they're ready to declare him game ready yet. I think he was out with a groin injury, so they're always very careful with those. But yeah, I don't know. The Senators have made strides, but I don't think it's enough to say. I mean, look at where they are in the standings. They've dug themselves such a hole. That's But we already know this is their Stanley Cup on Saturday to play against the Leafs.
It is, because I get it every week from Ross Levitan. He's the host of the Locked On Sens show, and we do the Locked On NHL Eastern Conference show every Wednesday. And he lets me know every single day. He's like, "Oh, the Senators only have like 5 road wins, but 2 of them are against Toronto." It's like, all right, sick. Guess who's gonna get a road win this weekend though? Ross, the Toronto Maple Leafs. Get ready for it, pal. It will be the first game, though, between the Leafs and Sens since DJ Smith got let go. So I will be curious to see kind of how different that they're playing. I haven't had a chance to watch them too closely since the firing. So I will be intrigued by how different this Ottawa team looks under Jacques Martin as opposed to DJ Smith.
I mean, I know it's a slow learning process. They've been I'm surprised. I think Jacques Martin's been quite patient with this group at times.
It seems like it's starting to turn, though. Like they've won 5 of their last 8, 4 of the last 6. So like it seems like they're starting to win some hockey games here.
They are. Like they had that one brutal 7-2 loss to the Rangers that kind of killed a little bit of their momentum, because you think, well, maybe they go on a little bit of a run, maybe they can slide back into the picture, but like you get that harsh reality when you lose a game like that, where it's like, yeah, no, maybe we're not there yet. So they are definitely playing better. They're keeping games closer. But again, I still think, like, I remember they had a big lead against the Flames and they allowed, I think, like 5 unanswered goals or something like that. Like, there's still issues like that with Ottawa with their defensive play. They can score. They've got the attitude right. Brady Tkachuk is going to do the things that Brady Tkachuk does. Yeah. It's just, are they going to play with the responsibility in the defensive zone? That's been their issue. That's what led to DJ Smith getting fired, and
couldn't buy a save either. Gotta get saves, right?
No, that's very fair. They have not been able to get saves, and I don't know.
Well, so if you're Toronto, we talk about what the keys to the game are. Well, like take advantage of a rusty Sens team. We're playing their first game since January 30th, first game in the month of February, and then like pressure and pepper the goaltender. Like they have not been good. Whoever gets the start, whether I guess it probably will end up being Korpisalo, but I think is Mad Sogard up currently with the team with the Anton Forsberg injury, whether it's him or Sogard, whoever it is, pepper the goaltender. They did a pretty good job of getting into the good scoring areas against Dallas, and they were rewarded because, well, quite frankly, Wedgwood's not he's not a terrific goalie. He's not an elite goalie. And when you get those scoring chances in tight, in front, in the slot and inner slot area, you're going to score more often than not. So Toronto's got to try and do that again in this game against them. What's another key you think to victory for the Maple Leafs?
I think the key is you're going to have to pressure them on the forecheck. You got to force them to make mistakes. That's kind of what happened in the last time they played Ottawa in Ottawa. They forced some turnovers, some poor decisions from the Senators defensemen, and it ended up in the back of their net. Like the Leafs were outplayed for a good portion of that game. That's the game that Joseph Woll also got hurt because he was playing hero way too much in that game. But they took advantage of mistakes by the Senators, and you got to do that. And I mean, look at how good the special teams played against Dallas. I think that's going to be a big factor against Ottawa too. I think Ottawa's, there's vulnerability there. There's a lot of issues going on in Ottawa. It's not just one thing kind of plaguing them. So you just got to take advantage of any opening they give.
Yeah, and then just play with details. Like, honestly, the details of the game. Play with purpose, play with urgency, clean tape-to-tape passes. I think that's going to be key also to winning. And it's key to be playing up to your potential, right? That was a big talking point earlier this week when Sheldon Keefe said that this team only plays up to their potential about 50% of the time. Well, they played up to their potential in the later 2/3 of the game against Dallas. Let's see if they can put together a 60-minute performance and play up to their potential here against the Senators. Because if they do that, they're very clearly the better team between the two squads, and they should be able to even up this season series at 2 wins apiece and get the full 2 points out of this one. Who starts in goal, though, you think, Dave?
I think they go with Samsonov again. I know it's a lot. I know the last game he didn't have his best stuff, but I think you're going to give him this game and then you can consider playing Jones in the next one, depending on how this one goes.
I give it to Jones.
Yeah,
I would. Yeah, I think I'd give this one to Jones, and it has nothing to do with how Sammy played. In Dallas, it's just he's now started 5-6 games in a row. Like it's been a while since Martin Jones has been between the pipes. I think it's just
wouldn't be surprising.
And look, like it's not that you want to take a team lightly, but it's a non-playoff team, right? Like let's give Martin Jones an opportunity to get back into the net and maybe get some confidence going with a solid performance against a team like the Ottawa Senators. And then you come back on Tuesday with Ilya Samsonov and a good test in the St. Louis Blues, who are back in the playoff race. So that's how I think I would do it. I think I'd roll actually with Martin Jones on Saturday, and then when they get back to Toronto, go back to Ilya Tuesday against the Blues.
I mean, if you're gonna go and put your backup in, Senators wouldn't be the worst idea. So and then you can then give Samsonov a little bit of rest. I wouldn't hate that. I just think Keefe sometimes just keeps it simple and goes with the guy who's on a little bit of a roll or has been winning games.
But you just at some point, like you can't ride this guy because that's what happened with Martin Jones, right? Like he got ridden to a point where he killed him. Like he refused to play Samsonov. He refused to play Hildeby, and Jones just started a whole bunch of games for like 3 weeks straight and a month straight almost, and it just kind of wore him down. And then he was ineffective for a couple of starts, and now we haven't seen him. Right now, all of a sudden, Samsonov gets back into the crease and he starts playing well, but we don't want to have the same situation happen where he plays too much. It's a little different, I suppose, because there was a big week with the All-Star break where, in the middle of these starts, so he did just have some rest, so he should be kind of recovered a little bit off of that. But still, I think at some point you're going to want to get Martin Jones a game here at some point, I would think. I think Ottawa would be maybe a better opportunity than against the St. Louis Blues, but we'll see. We'll kind of keep an eye on that one here if Sheldon Keefe gives an indication today, or perhaps he'll just wait until tomorrow to name a starter. We'll find that out and maybe tweet or retweet that information to you. All right, buddy, that's going to do it for today's pod. Got anything else you want to bring up? Or
I guess I'll have to quickly. Chiefs or 49ers, what's your Super Bowl pick?
Oh, God. Yeah, man. All week, I've kind of been leaning towards the Niners, and it's starting to worry me, that pick. Starting to worry me a little bit. Like I don't get how everybody is on the Chiefs.
Yet they've been there before. That's why.
But the number's not moving, Dave. Like if you look at FanDuel, like the number's still favoring San Francisco, which means there are some big money, heavy bettors, professional gamblers who believe the Niners are going to win this game. That's what's keeping the Niners as the favorite, because the public heavy on the Chiefs.
Yeah.
So it's and look, I think that this is going to be a game where the San Francisco 49ers, if they can just run the football as effectively and efficiently as possible, drain the clock, keep Patrick Mahomes off the field as much as possible, limit the possessions, and then maybe they can, shut down. If they shut down Kelsey, it's game over. I'll say that for sure. But certainly try and limit the Chiefs to field goals instead of touchdowns. And the Chiefs actually have not been a great red zone scoring team over the course of these playoffs. So I think it is possible that could happen. And if it does, that's kind of, I think, the formula for the Niners is run the ball, because the Chiefs aren't a very good run defense. And I'm still perplexed as to why the Ravens didn't run the ball. They had 6 carries with their running backs in that game a couple weeks ago. Makes no sense to me. Run the ball and keep the Chiefs to field goals, not touchdowns. And they should be able to sneak it out. They should be able to sneak it out. They have the better roster overall. They don't have Mahomes, who he's different. He's magical, and he could win a game by himself, which is the only reason why it's even a coin toss. But I'm gonna roll with the Niners.
I'm rolling with the Niners. I think if they can keep the ball in their playmakers' hands, not try to do anything over the top that they don't need to do, just let their guys do their thing. I think the 49ers can get pressure on Mahomes. It hasn't happened. Mahomes is missing a key part of his offensive line. Not being talked about enough. I like the Niners. Unfortunately, a good friend of the show, James from Offside Hockey Talk, is a huge Chiefs fan. So sorry to say, James. I gotta go with the Niners. I wouldn't be surprised if the Chiefs win, but I gotta go with the Niners.
Yeah, it's a close one, man. Like, it's a close one. It's going to be a good game, and I'm looking forward to it. Let us know down below who you think is going to win, Chiefs or Niners, for Super Bowl 58. All right, that'll do it for us here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on X at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti, and follow the show as well at Locked On Leafs. Go ahead, leave a like on this video if you enjoyed it, a comment down below. Any players that you're interested in the trade market, let me know in the comment section down below. We'll be back with another episode for you guys on Monday. Leafs and Sens tomorrow. Go Leafs, go. Until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.